Good evening and welcome to TDM Talk Show. This week we are recording our show at a very unique and special place, this theater heritage site, Teatro Dom Pedro V, and with a special guest, the head of the European Union Office to Hong Kong and Macau, Carmen Cano. Ambassador Carmen Cano, thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
You've been in this position for about 8 months. Tell us about your impressions so far.
Well, I arrived in September. I took up duties in September, and I think in the first 2-3 weeks I visited Macau. I felt very welcome. I felt very comfortable in this city. I enjoy very much the combination between East and West. And also I appreciate just walking around. You have the modern, the big city, but I think Macau has managed very well to preserve its cultural heritage. And it's also a pleasure to walk in the city and to see buildings such as this one, Dom Pedro Theater, which is a clear example on the special linkage between Europe and Macau through the historical connection with Portugal.
And yourself as a citizen of Spain, and you are very used somehow to this kind of environment in a way. Do you feel at home somehow?
Well, I feel completely at home. I'm a European. Originally, my nationality is Spain. And I feel really very comfortable. And I find the people from Macau very open, very friendly. And I think the foreigner immediately feels welcome here in Macau.
How different is this assignment from your previous one? You were based in Beijing for a number of years, yes. So you're familiar with relations with the People's Republic of China. But tell us about like looking at things from the lens of a special administrative region.
Well, I enjoyed my almost 10 years in Beijing, but when I arrived in Macau, I realized how beautiful being in a port city, enjoying the sea, enjoying the diversity and the cultural bridge between Europe and Asia that Macau is.
And well, every year in May we have, of course, the Europe Day celebration. And by the time of, let's say, normally by early May, the European Union issues this annual report on both SARs. Let's talk, of course, about the one on Macau, which was issued earlier this month, as I was saying. And overall, the assessment is positive on the implementation of the one country, two systems, but there are a few remarks, let's say, for instance, calling on the local authorities to improve governance, and also, for instance, with regards like encouraging Macau authorities to consider ways to promote the greater public involvement in the election of the chief executive. There's also a note on the need to modernize public administration in a way to make it more efficient, among other suggestions. What's the key message of this year's report?
Well, maybe let me first explain the context, the broad context of the report.
Yes.
This is a report that the European Union institutions, the Commission and the EAS, prepare annually since the handover of Macau to the People's Republic of China. It was so requested by the European Parliament, and the objective is for the European Union to follow closely the developments in Macau, particularly the implementation of the one country, two system, because we consider that we are
stakeholders somehow.
Stakeholders in the future of Macau. We have a very good relations, and this annual report is also an opportunity to think about the state of play of our relations, which are the priorities, and where is the scope to move forward, also underlining and supporting the priorities of the Macau government for the development of the special administrative region. You have mentioned some aspects of the report. I think the report says very clearly that overall the implementation of one country, two systems is satisfactory. We point at the need to reform the administration, but this is once again a priority for the Macau authorities because the reform is already ongoing. And this encouragement for the authorities of Macau to promote further public participation in political life is a message that is not new in this year's report. It was in last year's and probably the previous year too, because we find that the Macau society is eager and ready to participate more in public life and political life.
And then this report, just like what happened over the past couple of years, has been met with a strong reaction from both the Macau SAR government and China's Foreign Affairs Ministry, labeling some of those remarks, and I would assume that probably the reaction could be related to those comments on the need for greater participation for the chief executive election as irresponsible and hinting at something that would be regarded as an interference in internal affairs of the Macau SAR and of the People's Republic of China. What's your comment on this?
Well, I don't know about the reasons why the Macau authorities had this strong reaction this year. Maybe that is something that you should ask them. I find that the report is very balanced. It's overall positive. We recognize the efforts made by the Macau authorities regarding rule of law, fight against corruption. Also the fact that the Macau government is focusing on people's livelihoods and well-being. We also recognize the efforts for diversification of the economy, and these are efforts that maybe we can support through our cooperation with Macau, through our companies here. So I think that it's a report that shows the positive aspects of our cooperation and our readiness to continue working with the Macau authorities to strengthen the different elements of cooperation, the different fields where we are already working together in the benefit of Macau people and the European people.
Still in this kind of chapter related to not only political development but individual rights and guarantees. So you point out that the Macau government remained opposed to a proposal by the United Nations Committee Against Torture to establish an independent human rights body. Macau argues that this recommendation was not applicable to Macau as an SAR of China, but it seems from what's written here that you would like it to come into fruition, so you think it would be a step forward to set up this kind of body, right?
Well, that's well, part of the report is very factual.
Yes,
I mean, we need to describe what happened during 2016, and that's, of course, a discussion that took place with the Macau authorities. It's for the Macau authorities to decide and to consider what to do, of course.
The same goes with, let's say, for instance, concerns regarding discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation and gender equality. Particularly, let's say, for instance, the fact that same-sex relationships are not included in the act governing domestic violence and considering domestic violence as a criminal offense, and also the need to promote gender equality in the area of sexual harassment, etc. So you'd like to see something else being done here?
You know, we have an expertise that we are ready to share with the people of Macau and with the Macau government. We are not so far away. All this legislation which is already in place in European countries related to gender equality, anti-domestic violence, same-sex marriage, this is also very new for some of our member states. And we think that we have something that would be useful for the Macau society, and we would be ready to exchange this expertise and to see how maybe our experience, the lesson we have learned, can be useful for the people of Macau and for the Macau government, because definitely I think these are important topics, important issues for the development of a modern society.
You also mentioned the fact that some Hong Kong politicians, and even there was a case of a journalist from Hong Kong being denied entry into Macau, and we have recently more cases of legislators from the Hong Kong Legislative Council just a couple of weeks ago ahead of Zhang Dejiang's visit, China's top legislator to Macau, and they were denied entry. This is not the first time this happens. This has stirred up debate in Hong Kong. How is the European Union office following this kind of situations, and what's your comment on this?
Well, my comment is that we hope that the cooperation between Hong Kong and Macau will contribute to avoid these incidents and to clarify and to solve any problem regarding the entry to legislators coming from Hong Kong to Macau.
Talking about, because this somehow is related to legal field, but I'd like to move on to something else, which is the cooperation between the European Union and Macau in legal affairs. This has been going on for a number of years. So your comment on the current status of cooperation and any future plans to deepen that sort of cooperation, and the way the European Union regards the implementation of the one country, two systems from the perspective of Macau's very own legal system, which is based to a great extent on the one which was left by the Portuguese administration.
I think Macau's system is based on rule of law, and there it's obvious that we share a number of principles and values. So the objective of this legal cooperation is precisely to support this system in Macau, which is absolutely in line with the one country, two systems that the European Union fully supports. It's a cooperation which is working very well. We discussed it also in the framework of our annual dialogue in December last year, and there is a clear commitment to continue because it's giving good results.
But is there any specific areas within the legal field that you'd like to deepen cooperation, or just keep on with the current scheme?
Well, that I leave to the experts, because this scheme favors exchange of views and expertise and perspectives between experts, between jurists from Europe and from Macau. So I think it's for them also to identify which are the aspects where they think that this exchange of views and expertise would be more beneficial for the Macau system.
Another remark that we've been noticing in the European Union annual report has to do with public procurement or government procurement. So the European Union calls on the Macau authorities to enact modern and competitive and open government procurement framework. Why? And are you somehow disappointed that the Macau SAR government has been somehow perhaps not moving on swiftly with such a move?
Well, why public procurement is mentioned there is because as I have told you at the beginning, we firmly support the efforts of the Macau government to diversify the economy. And I think that the need to further develop infrastructures is very much connected to the economic priorities of Macau. And there, Europe can present the strength of our companies. There are already a number of companies in Macau. There are many others who would be able to compete on equal terms in a public procurement procedure. And I think that's not only the interest of the European Union, it should also be the interest of Macau to have the best possible bidders, the strongest companies, and the ones who can offer the best quality in the work. So this is an issue that we continue discussing with the Macau authorities. I'm not disappointed. I think that there are a number of companies already present here, but this is just the very first step, because we can do much more on that, and it would be the interest of Macau to further continue and to make progress in this dossier.
And there has been some progress in another matter, which has to do with tax information, exchange of information on tax matters, because the Macau SAR is about to adopt a new bill, which would imply some sort of automatic exchange of information. Would that be something that I would say this is in line with the commitments of the Macau SAR government, and also with the dialogue that is been going on, particularly with the European Union over the past several years, right?
Yeah, I think every initiative which aims at more transparency regarding information on taxation issues is very welcome. In any case, we continue this year a dialogue with Macau on these taxation issues.
From what you know so far, what would be the next steps from the perspective of the European Union to be taken by Macau and other jurisdictions of the same kind?
Well, the next steps is to engage in this dialogue during this year to provide information which shows the efforts that Macau is doing. For me, that would be the most important step, and we have the whole year for that.
You're optimistic on this matter, I believe.
I'm not an expert on this matter,
yeah, but politically speaking,
I think that the efforts made by Macau should be recognized, but at the same time it's important that this communication gets to the experts in Brussels and that they get the details and they get the information they need regarding these new tools that Macau is discussing.
We had the latest joint committee meeting between the European Union and Macau in December.
In December, yeah, in Brussels.
Right? The main points raised back then of what is yet to be accomplished in terms of cooperation. So you did mention, and we've talked about public procurement in terms of exchange of information on tax matters. You can see some progress from the perspective of the EU. What else would you single out?
Well, we had a very good meeting and a very frank exchange of views. The European Union is Macau's second largest trade partner after mainland China. We have a very good trade and economic relations. We have here a number of companies who are ready, as I have said, to support the diversification efforts made by the Macau authorities. We had also an exchange of views on how we can move forward in the people-to-people exchanges, because I think it's very important that young people from Europe and from Macau know each other much better, and not only young people, not only students, also researchers, for instance, and that's why we have a program called Horizon 2020. Right. Where Macau is participating. We already have one project focused on biomedical products, which shows how European researchers and researchers from Macau can work together on these fields, according also to the priorities of the Macau government.
And I'd like to talk about well, by mentioning people-to-people exchanges and linkages, we have, of course, the European Union Economic Program.
That's what I was going to say.
Exactly, the flagship program. But as far as I know, it is about to expire by the end of this year or early next year. Is that correct?
It will finish by the end of this year, but it doesn't mean that our cooperation on these issues will finish by the end of the year.
Will there be a new tool?
There are other tools in the framework of the Jean Monnet chairs that I think we should use, because the project has shown so far the importance of making the European Union better known in Macau among the young people, because the European Union is difficult to understand. So I think that's precisely why this project is being very successful. If you go to the university, you will see, for instance, the EU model, which is a number of students, people from Macau, young people, who are rehearsing, who are representing the European Council. So they share the different roles of the heads of the state and government of the 28 member states, and they talk as if they were in the European Council. So this is just an example. They are doing a lot of activities for the EU to be better understood here in Macau, and I think this is a two-way street too, because we have teachers, we have professors, we have students coming from Europe, and it's important for them that they understand much better Macau and its role as bridge between Europe and Asia.
So when we're looking at economic cooperation in this field, so the tools that will be employed, you were talking about perhaps under the Jean Monnet chair scheme. Will there be any other? We also have the Horizon 2020.
And we have the Erasmus.
Yeah, the Erasmus
Plus. Yeah.
Or Erasmus Plus,
yes.
Exactly. So that would be to foster exchange of students and researchers.
Yes, between European universities and universities from Macau.
The issue of raising awareness on understanding what the European Union is all about, the European Union is all about. As a representative of the EU overseas, I believe that would be somehow challenging at times to keep on projecting this kind of soft power of the European Union against the backdrop of rising protectionism, of rising anti-EU populism that has been springing out in many countries in Europe. After the Brexit referendum, tell us about this challenge.
Yeah, I was sure we were not going to finish the interview without talking about Brexit.
Exactly, for sure.
No, well, I think that, I mean, the European Union, as everybody in the world, all the countries in the world, is going through challenging times. I think we live in a much more uncertain world that we lived 1 year ago. In Europe, we are facing challenges, but I think we have the tools, and we have decided after Brexit that we were ready to work on a stronger European Union. What I always say when people ask me about Brexit is that the European Union goes beyond Brexit, and the European Union is much more than Brexit. But what Brexit has created is a moment of reflection, to think, well, what is going wrong? Why we have people from a member state who want to leave the European Union? Why do we have this rise of populism in European countries? And then the heads of state and government of the 27 member states, because some meetings are only taking place at 27 when we discuss the future of Europe, well, we have realized that we need to focus on people's lives, on the concerns of the ordinary European citizens. And these concerns are to create growth, to create employment, and also to do more about security. Because in Europe, the same as in the States, the same as in Asian countries, there is a lot of people who are frustrated, who feel that they haven't benefited from globalization and who want just something different. And that has been an easy field for populism to grow. So we have shown in Europe, in France, in the Netherlands, in Austria, that populism can be defeated. But we cannot be complacent, because if we don't work harder, well, maybe we will have again populism in the next French elections in 4 years' time, or in the next Dutch elections, who knows? So definitely there is a wish to focus our work and to answer people's needs, and at the same time to continue building a stronger Europe. Because the message that we receive from the Europeans, what the surveys show, what the results of the French elections show too, is that the Europeans trust in Europe, that the euro is a single currency which is highly valued by more than 70% of the Europeans who live in the Eurozone. And what the reflection in Europe has not only been between the governments. I think that the ordinary people, the European citizen, has also realized that we cannot take for granted what we have. And in 60 years since the European Union was created, well, we have a continent which is in peace between its member states. We have achieved a single market, 500 million people in a trade bloc, which also give us a lot of leverage when we are negotiating with other partners. We have 60 agreements, trade agreements with third countries. We have a single currency among 19 member states. People can move around in Europe. You don't need to show your passport when you go from Spain to Portugal, or from France to Netherlands. So there are a lot of advantages, a lot of achievements that people had taken for granted.
There are, and to wrap up our talk, there are some challenges which, some would even say threats to the European Union project and core values, which come from within the Union, but also from outside of the Union. For instance, if you look eastwards, you have Russia if you look across the Atlantic, you have the new Trump administration, and elsewhere you have, of course, you also have the challenge of, or potential challenge brought by Turkey under this now policy adopted by the Turkish leader. And this leads me to the issue of the rising protectionism, or at least some sort of backlash against globalization on the one hand, and also more authoritarian model, which seems to be making inroads in many countries or several countries. This kind of perception that there is a need of strong leadership, even if that's at the expense of a certain approach to rule of law from the perspective of Western liberal democracies. Mm-hmm. How concerned are you about all this?
Well, I think these are challenges not only for the European Union, these are challenges for the global order, for a rule-based order as we know it. When you talk about protectionism, about authoritarianism, I think it's a mistake to think that any single country can face on its own the challenges that we are all facing. For instance, climate change. That's an obvious example. How to deal with common goods, energy, for instance. And also, talking about protectionism, I think it is wrong to think that if you close your borders to trade, then your people are going to live better. Your people are going to have better jobs. It's just the other way around. So I think that the European Union we believe on a multilateral world, according to well-established rules, the WTO, the international law, and we are ready to work with other partners to make this world better.
Even with a small partner such as Macau? What would be the role of Macau in all this?
Well, we can do a lot of things together, talking about climate change, for instance, green cities, smart cities. Macau could be a model for the rest of China, or why not? So this is an example. But there are many more. We could do more regarding anti-human trafficking, which is a cooperation that we already started last year. We have mentioned some of the projects that we have. We are also joining in a program to train interpreters, and that benefit both sides. I mean, I have been a diplomat for 25 years now, and I know how important an interpreter is. Very often what you say is not important, it's what the interpreter says, what is going to decide the meeting. So definitely these are examples on how between Macau and the European Union we can move forward and focus on cooperation that is beneficial for our citizens, for our companies, and also for the region and for the world.
And with this, we wrap up our talk, Ambassador Carmen Cano. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And to you at home, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week.